Tons of news today. Let's start with this. So we are expecting AMD to probably announce the 7800 XT and 7700 XT this week at Gamescom. We're also seeing an interesting rumor of AMD allegedly preps an RX 6750 GRE to rival RTX 4060 Ti at $299. Now, this is certainly interesting. I saw this at tomshardware.com. If you try to track it down to the actual source, this seems to be coming from this post right here from Little Enemy Pigeon saying, chatting with the boss of Yeston today. Now, Yeston produces, GPU coolers, right? They're an AIB partner that produces GPUs. Chatting with the boss of Yeston today, he said that Yeston is currently the only AIB authorized by AMD and the only company in China. Then let us pay attention to the graphics card RX 6750 GRE, which would be Golden Rabbit upgrade package, which is said to be the price of 4060 and the performance of 4060 Ti. I will also follow up on the follow-up card A. The Yeston 6600 and 6400 models currently on sale are very stable, and the failure rate is very low. So this apparently is the post that we are following, this is coming from. So I don't know what to make of the reliability of this type of source, but this would certainly be interesting. There is a bit of a question mark, though, of what exactly would this be? Because the RX 6750 XT already uses the full Navi 22 die. There's no room to add on more, cores into that configuration. So, and then there's already the 6700 XT, and the 6750 XT already bumped its memory speeds a bit. So what exactly would be the 6750 GRE? It's also weird in the sense that the 7900 GRE is a lower model than the 7900 XT, but this seems to be positioning this as being higher than the 6750 XT. So there's a lot weird about this that makes me wonder if this would really happen. My thought on if this was actually real and did offer a significant performance bump, what would it be? So again, you can't make we're already using the full Navi 22 die on the 6750 XT, right? But what about a cut down Navi 21 die that didn't have a fully functioning memory bus system, right? Like you can get defective dies, and all of the Navi 21 GPUs, all of them use 16 gigabytes of memory on a 256-bit bus. What if you had, by this point in time, years later, a big stock of GPUs with a defect, Navi 21 GPUs, with they couldn't live up to the 256-bit bus, right? You see what I'm saying? If some of those existed and were stockpiled at this point and you wanted to make a product with them, could you offer a Navi 21 GPU that was cut down as some sort of an upgraded 6750 GRE? I think if this ends up being real, that would certainly be the most interesting possibility. But once again, who knows? I don't know. This feels pretty weird. Again, though, remember, we did get an RX 7900 GRE, which also felt like a weird rumor, but did end up being real. By the way, we're getting an update on that apparently in China, so these are available worldwide, but through system integrators. In other words, like you can buy them in a pre-built system. But buying them on the DIY market is currently limited to China. No word on if that would ever change. But it does look like the price tag on them are changing at least a little bit. It looks like we've seen a 4% decrease in the price since the launch, which was just, a couple weeks ago? Feels like I just reported on this. Maybe that's in preparation for competition from something like a 7800 XT. We shall see. Now, we've also seen a lot of interesting developments from Intel with their Arc GPUs. They are making some very big claims, saying that their latest driver update has offered big improvements in a lot of DirectX 11 games, boosting performance since launch. Now, it is important to note that they're comparing the latest driver here to their launch driver. And these are graphs directly from Intel. Another thing that I find interesting to note here is that this is specifically saying that the test system is on a Core i5 13400F. Why is that relevant? So usually GPU testing is done on a high-end CPU to eliminate CPU bottlenecks from the equation when you're testing the maximum performance of the GPU. Now, what I think could be going on here is that part of the problem of the Intel driver could have been related to CPU overhead, CPU utilization. So it's possible that what they're doing here isn't necessarily misleading. It's just, I think, maybe important to understand what it is. And I haven't been able to confirm this. I don't have time to look at this in my own testing yet. But again, I'm thinking about why would they be using an i5 here? It could be to show that some of the driver improvements could be reduced CPU overhead, which would show up and improve performance on an i5 system, which I think is very realistic to pair an Arc A750 with. So I think that makes sense as a comparison point. But again, it's a little different than maybe what you would normally see in GPU testing, right? They're trying to show that they're maybe reducing the GPU driver overhead. If I pop out of the way here, if you look at these as percentage gains per game, they're showing something like a 5% gain in Destiny 2, ranging all the way up to a 33% gain in Overwatch 2. With the more typical results seeming to be here more like this kind of 18%-ish range. And they're also going and showing the 99th percentile results, or in other words, what a lot of times would be referred to as 1% low results, the worst 1% of frames. A lot of times this is where you'll see more of the stutters during gameplay, that kind of thing. And they are showing significant results here, actually looking more impressive than what they showed with the overall averages. Again, these are Intel's claimed testing numbers. And again, they are, showing it on the Core i5, possibly to highlight, a reduction in CPU limitations, possibly due to the driver. So that is certainly interesting and a big claim. They're also noting that XeSS is now included in 70+ games, which is really good. I'm really excited about XeSS. It continues to improve, and I love that it has a DP4A fallback to work on other GPU vendors like AMD and Nvidia, where I have seen some results in my, not super thorough testing, but actually just playing around on my Steam Deck, where some versions of the latest XeSS, like I preferred using XeSS on my Steam Deck in Remnant 2 rather than using AMD's own FSR2 from an image quality and performance standpoint. Also, Intel is talking about an update of PresentMon. There was recently a Gamers Nexus video with Intel talking about it there. Now, this certainly looks interesting. This is not just tied to Intel GPUs. This should support any GPU vendor and is open source. And the idea here is it's similar to what you're getting through, like in my videos, I'm usually using MSI Afterburner and Riva Tuner Statistics Server to get a whole bunch of stats for how the game is running. The frame rate, the GPU temps, the 1% lows, the GPU usage percentage, CPU usage percentage, all of that. Now, this is something similar to that. It seems to have a very nice interface. I want to play around with this myself. Intel, in their video with Gamers Nexus, was making a big deal over this GPU busy metric and how it, which this enables. So the GPU busy metric, it says, shows real-time CPU and GPU balance and how the resources in your machine are being utilized, allowing you to better evaluate computing bottlenecks in your games. Now, I still need to play around with this, but to me this sounds very, very similar to just when I'm using my Afterburner overlay, when I identify a CPU bottleneck by kind of counterintuitively at first noticing that the GPU usage percent is low. So when the GPU usage is low, it usually means the GPU is waiting for something, which is oftentimes something to do with the CPU or driver overhead, poor game code, that kind of a thing. So this seems very similar to that, unless I'm misunderstanding it, although this is kind of presenting it in a nice visual where you're seeing the GPU busy time versus the frame time. So if the GPU busy time is not matching the frame time, it means that the frames are taking longer to render and the GPU is waiting for something else, right? So I think that this really, to me, doesn't sound maybe as revolutionary as it seemed to be trying to be presented in Intel's presentation in that Gamers Nexus video, in that it seems very similar to what you get by just looking at the GPU usage percentage in other overlays like I've been using. However, this seems like the way that it's presenting it might be a lot easier to see and visualize and understand, or maybe I'm misunderstanding a subtle difference here. I'd like to play around with this a little bit more myself, and maybe even look into whether I'd want to switch to using this overlay versus the overlay that I use currently when doing my GPU benchmark videos. I don't know, that would take some playing around to see, but it certainly looks interesting, and I like this development. Also, alongside with these driver updates, NeoWin is reporting that there was also a Intel firmware update that bumped up the clock speeds on the Arc A380 GPU, which is interesting, by 150 megahertz. So it seems like there could be a bit of a performance boost happening along with some of these driver updates. Also, AMD currently has the Starfield game bundle going with their GPUs and CPUs. Nvidia also has a Overwatch 2 Invasion game bundle, which maybe seems a bit less impressive. Well, Intel is also jumping into the bundle game here, giving away 2 games with their latest CPUs and GPUs. Specifically, this is with their Intel 12th or 13th gen core processors and Intel Arc graphics cards. The 2 games they're giving away are Nightingale and Assassin's Creed Mirage. It looks like the date started on August 21st. However, when you look at the website's specific details, it does mention the date August 11th as a start date. So it's unclear that if you maybe bought a GPU before the 21st, between August 11th and leading up, if maybe there's some way to also get access to these games. And again, you would need to be buying from a participating retailer and all of that. But it is always fun to see added value thrown into CPU or GPU purchases. So if these were games you were interested in, buying a 12th, 13th gen CPU or an Intel Arc graphics card, that does just sweeten the deal. Now, this was interesting, moving into a bit of NVIDIA news. Now, this is not officially from NVIDIA, but it's reported that NVIDIA GPU BIOS flashing tools can now flash any BIOS to any GPU, bypassing restrictions. Now, it's important to note that this could absolutely damage your GPU. I will link all these articles in my video description as usual, but again, follow this at your own risk. But basically, there has been a BIOS signature lock that had prevented alterations to firmware, but it looks like thanks to a new BIOS verification method employing an on-die security chip called Falcon. Sorry, that's how they've locked it down. There's a Falcon security chip. However, the tools created by Kefi and Vey, I may have mispronounced those, now provide separate solutions to bypass these limitations. Apparently, they completely bypass the BIOS signature checks, permitting cross-flashing of firmware without restrictions. So you could do all sorts of interesting stuff with this, including probably destroy your GPU. So be very careful. With great power comes great responsibility and all of that. But if you're interested, there you go. And I'm sure somebody will do something fun with that at some point. We're seeing reports that Intel's next socket, so this would not be for the 14th gen chips, which are compatible with the same motherboards and sockets as the 12th and 13th generation Intel CPUs. The next one coming after the 14th gen, which we would assume would be called the 15th gen, but you never know, It looks like it will only support DDR5, whereas the current, 12th and 13th gen chips have had motherboard versions, some supporting DDR4, some supporting DDR5. It does look like, as reported at Tech Power up here, that early rumors and reports are showing that the next socket would only support DDR5, which at this point I do think makes sense, and AMD has already moved on to only supporting DDR5 already with their Ryzen 7000 series. Now, this headline grabbed my attention, but it ended up being less interesting than I thought. This is over here at tomshardware.com, where they say a $95 AMD CPU becomes a 16 gigabyte GPU to run AI software. I was confused. What they mean is an AMD APU. In other words, they're using the integrated GPU on the CPU to run AI software. The interesting thing about it being that because it's an APU, it's using it's an integrated GPU, it's using your system's RAM, which means that you could allocate a large amount of RAM, like 16 gigabytes, for example, to the APU to use for running the AI software. Now, apparently it's not super well supported in a lot of this software, and there's a lot of details to get this to actually work. I think this was a Ryzen 5 4600G. But the idea is, in a lot of AI workloads, you simply just can't do the workload if you don't have enough VRAM. So within a cheap part like this, being able to use your system memory as VRAM, you could then run an AI application that required 16 gigabytes of VRAM. It would just take a long time to compute on the slow GPU, but it would actually run, unlike a dedicated GPU that only had 8 or 12 gigabytes of VRAM if you needed to run a 16 gigabyte model. So at least kind of interesting there, but I was confused when they said CPU. Anyway, whatever. Let's move on. A while back, we had seen a bunch of drama about whether or not AMD is blocking DLSS in their sponsored partnered games. And Starfield being the prime example, people are wondering, is Starfield going to ship with DLSS or XeSS, or will it be locked down to just FSR? AMD had a lot of no comments when asked if they're doing this, which, certainly makes people, it points to them maybe doing the blocking. But again, there was never an official confirmation. There was just a lot of no comments. But now that people are able to preload the Starfield game files, people have been looking at them to try to figure out if DLSS or XeSS DLLs are included, and it's looking like the answer is no at this point. However, does that mean that there wouldn't be a day one patch, which then drops in some DLSS and XeSS support? Certainly could still happen, so this is a bit early to get completely riled up about this. Also, we are seeing the modder Pure Dark, who has added DLS3 and DLSS2 to a whole bunch of games, has confirmed that he does feel confident in getting Nvidia DLSS3 and DLSS2 mod supported in the game on launch day. Says that it has a pretty streamlined process for getting DLSS into games, and feels confident it could be done at launch. However, the downside here is that Pure Dark does lock their DLSS mods behind a Patreon paywall, I believe. So of course it would obviously be nicer to just have it in the game for people with GPUs that support those technologies. In other news, AMD released a Radeon GPU Detective tool, which is a tool for developers to analyze GPU crashes. So this is more of a developer tool rather than for the end user, but it's still, making it easier to identify GPU crashes and timeouts and all of that seems like a good thing. The idea is that you could now switch developers could switch the driver to a crash analysis mode through the Radeon developer panel before replicating a crash, and then it will generate some data in text or JSON format output to help developers identify what is causing the crashes. We're also seeing reports that AMD's Radeon RX 7900 XTX has achieved an 890% speed up in generative AI with stable diffusion optimization. You have to be apparently running, a very specific version of this to get this performance uplift, but it is very nice to see AMD focusing on improving their support for this. Again, it says tuning for Gen AI, much like tuning for crypto mining performance, will have mileage vary significantly depending on the model configuration being used. This article is about the most common A111 Xformers config. Honestly, guys, I don't do this generative AI stuff, so I don't know all the details of the different versions of all these and everything. But apparently, using the right version, you can get a big uplift here. My sources will be in the video description, and it says there is a detailed guide by AMD, which will talk about how to achieve these performance uplifts. In GPU cooler news, we're seeing that Colorful has launched a dual-fan GeForce RTX 4070 iGame Ultra graphics card. Looks like this if you're interested. So more GPUs out there. This looks like another white one. So more people looking to do white builds, having some more options is always good. And last thing I'll leave you with is we're seeing HDR10 Plus gaming debuting with the game The First Descendant next month. What is HDR10 Plus? Well, this is being announced by Samsung in a partnership with Nexon Games to make The First Descendant the first title featuring this. And apparently HDR10 Plus is a standard that was first unveiled by Samsung in late 2021. And to date, it is available on Samsung monitors, the Odyssey 7 series and above, and some TV models from last year and this year. And the basic idea is that it would improve on HDR10 and be more similar to Dolby Vision in that HDR10 Plus includes dynamic metadata, which means the brightness and contrast are automatically optimized scene by scene or frame by frame in a way bespoke for each display's HDR capabilities. Anyway, I honestly am not a super expert on all of the various HDR standards, but I thought I'd throw this in the news video at the end. And the last thing I'll mention is I need to hurry up and get to work, or I will be late to my first day getting my classroom ready, which brings me to mention that I am still teaching high school. The school year is starting today, and so students don't come till next week. But if content does slow down on my channel, at least for a little bit while I adjust to the new school year, that would explain why. I still love teaching. I am still going to teach teach this school year, despite the success of the channel. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.